Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for your patience as I worked through some technical issues. Heads up, we had a bit of a storm where I am, so my internet may be a little flaky.
But your
Anyway,
house
how are
is
you,
still
Amy?
standing, hopefully.
How are you doing, Amy?
Good. Yeah, the sun has just started shining here. You can probably see it like hitting me in the face right now. But
Yes.
we did also have a quick rainstorm. It was just more of a sun shower and then it moved on as well. So
That's good. That's good. Let's hope that the weather's, stays or behaves for us, and the internet also behaves. So, thank you everyone for joining us today. We thought we were further along when we were chatting beforehand. We so this is session 3. We thought we were on session 4, but this is session 3, and we will be really diving into resumes today.
I love this
Um,
topic. I love it and I hate it because everyone has so many problems with resumes. I don't, I think that people who are new to a place have unique problems that not everyone has. So I'm so glad we're covering this topic, but it's just such a tough one for everyone, from people graduating from university all the way up to the most senior levels of business. So if you're in this session today and you're having trouble writing your resume, that is like everyone has the same issue. And it's kind of funny that we haven't had that many innovations in resumes, isn't it? Over like
it
so many years, and it's such an
it
issue
really
for people.
yeah, it's kind of it really has not changed or evolved much. I think it's getting a little more the document is getting a little more dynamic, but at the end of the day, the reader likes to read something that's simple to read and has
Yeah.
the information they need to make a decision about whether to interview you or not. So
Hmm.
yeah, it really has not changed much, has it? Um,
No, and I do think though that and at times, and maybe this is something we can discuss at the end. I think people try to get really creative with their resumes, and I actually think that while the intent behind that is great, it actually doesn't turn out very well for the person who's applying.
It's true. You're right.
Hmm.
Creativity is often a distraction when it comes
Yes.
to writing resumes, and so
Yeah.
yeah, I think we will be touching on that briefly in today's training. So let's dive into it then, shall we?
Great.
All
Hmm.
right. So I do have a bit of an extensive deck for this because there's some more technical things to think about and talk about and look at when it comes to resumes. So I'm just going to share my slides.
And this is an issue. Oh, sorry, an issue. Whenever I think resumes, I think issues. Um, this is such. This is such a. This is like you and I have run a similar session to this for the First 30 program, and I
Wow.
loved it. And I mean, I just you are one of the leading experts, and then you're gonna, yeah, but you are one of the leading experts in this field, and it's a field where I think there's a lot of people who try to be experts in it. It's really, really tough to master the resume writing. And the thing that I love about what you do is matching it to the job that someone and Massimo was talking about. It depends on the industry you're in, and it's so true. And it's about staying focused on your resume. And I think, and I'm kind of probably spoiling it for you, Kamara. So, spoiler alert, is that I think people want to have this catch-all resume that you can just send out for every job. And the problem is, if you're applying, you and I talked, and we talked with the group maybe a few times ago about the bridge opportunities. Well, if you take a bridge job and then you go and you want to work in a specific field that's not where you took your bridge job, you can't just put it all in one place. You have to really sort it and make sense of it for the person who's reading it. And that means
Right.
focusing and a tailored resume depending on the type of role that you're applying to.
Totally, totally. I wouldn't say you're spoiling it. You're reinforcing one of the most important points about resume writing, and that's the before part. So that's not a spoil.
Okay.
So anyway, before I jump into the slides, please do feel free to put your questions or comments or concerns in the chat. We will be getting to them. Because I'm on PowerPoint, I can't see the chat. So Amy, please cut me off if you see something come up that's quite
Sure.
topical. And then we'll address it as as time in a timely fashion. So all right, so you're probably joining us for the third time today, and Amy is the CEO of First 30, which is a leading onboarding and outsourcing company, and I am a resume writer. So today is really my sweet spot in terms of what I love to talk about in job search. And I think Amy and I really came together and share the same passion and enthusiasm for this session, in that we want to, first of all, welcome newcomers from all over the world to Canada and the US. And, thank you for choosing our country or the US as your destination of choice. And it really makes North America stronger. Amy, anything to add?
Not this time. I'm just really happy. It is, we've talked about it before. It's a really hard journey, especially if it's an unexpected one. And that's one of the reasons that we're running this session, is because there's more and more people coming to Canada where it's an unexpected journey, and that you have done no planning for, very little. So that's why we thought that it's important to start running these sessions to support new people who are new to North America.
Absolutely. So let's dive right in then. Let's talk about resumes. Today we're going to cover, is Amy's already mentioned it, we're going to talk about the before part, before you write your resume. We talked a little bit about before you start your job search in our last session. This is about before you write your resume. We're going to talk about tracking and taking stock of your work wins. This is really important for building and refreshing and updating your resume as you move along in your career and your job search. We'll talk about your resume in North America, what it looks like, what to expect in terms of structure and sections, and how you might want to go about approaching it. What to write in your North American resume. We'll clear up some common resume pitfalls and misconceptions as we move along. And we will wrap up with a Q&A as we usually do.
But don't worry about asking your questions as we go too.
Right. Yes. Yeah, for sure. Please do ask. Yep. This is my all-time favorite GIF when I think of job searching. This is from Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
And I think we all struggle with this when it comes to resumes, when it comes to interviewing, when it comes to networking. So we need to market ourselves, but it's often very confusing and difficult to really hone in on what we should share about ourselves that differentiates us and makes us a great candidate. Would you agree, Amy?
Oh yes, and I see resumes all the time that, like, the bulk of the summary at the beginning, it's saying this, I'm nice, and that's great, but that's what you say, like, that's what the impression you leave once you get in the door. Your resume is really about, are you qualified for this job? Are you a candidate to keep that goes to the keep pile, right? And that's about your qualifications, your degree, if you have degrees, your degrees, the volunteer work you've done that's related, transferable skills, right?
Absolutely. And that's why this next part becomes super important. And it's to figure out if you're ready to write your resume or not. And there are a couple things you need to know or need to have nailed down before you can confidently know if you're ready to write your resume. So the first thing is you've identified a target job. So we talked about that in our last session, about the importance of a target job. Now, it doesn't have to be your dream job, the be all end all job, but it needs to be a job that you've identified, that you're qualified for, and that you want to go after. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I want to liken this to food and cooking, but you don't start cooking before you know what you're making, right? Otherwise, you're going to end up with a pretty weird meal. So, and then the second thing that we really need to have nailed down is, what have I already accomplished? So, one thing that will be a running theme as we move through today's session is you're going to realize that accomplishments are the meat of your resume, because they are what reinforce and demonstrate how you are qualified for a job. So it's important to know what we've already done in our careers and what we've already, all the great things we've made happen. So that, again, cooking wise, what ingredients do you already have in your kitchen? Like, what can you pull from to build that meal that you've identified, or to move you towards that target job that you've identified?
In the First 30 program, one of the ways that because the accomplishment piece is often so difficult for people, isn't it, Kamara? Like, people summarize what they've done. So I have one comment and a question for you that may be on people's minds.
Yes.
There's people that have only been in their careers for a few years. So maybe they summarize what they have done because they're not really at the point where they'll have to had a ton of work accomplishments, right? So the question, and I'll make my comment before, so I'll let you just answer that. The question, which I'm sure people are thinking, is like, at what point do I start listing my accomplishments versus summarizing my experience? And one of the ways we try to draw this out when we have participants going through our First 30 program is we ask them, what if someone were doing the jobs that you had and they were doing them poorly? What would that look like? And how did you do that job differently? How do you do the job differently? So it helps people think in a little bit of almost like a different way about maybe how they can pull those accomplishments out.
I think that's a really great approach, to think of what you've done differently beyond executing a bunch of duties. So for me, when someone's been in a job, say for a brief period of time, or hasn't entered their career yet, I would be looking beyond paid work experience to see what we could pull from to highlight strengths if on their resume. So real life projects in school, volunteer work. So everything really counts. It's just a matter of making it make sense to the reader and making it make sense in their world and the context of the job that you're targeting. So we can definitely get into that more. We'll talk about kind of the anatomy of an accomplishment statement as we move further along.
Perfect.
But
there's a quick question from Asmo just about whether this should be at the beginning or the body of the resume. Should it be right up front in the summary, or should it be peppered throughout?
Accomplishments?
Accomplishments, yes.
So we'll get into that, Massimo. So you'll be able to see basically accomplishments are 80% of your resume. So you'll see as we get further along. If this doesn't answer, like as we move forward, if that's not answering your question, please let me know. Oops. All right. Okay. So one of the ways to go through the journey of identifying what you've already accomplished is to really note down what you've accomplished on an ongoing basis. So this is where the work wins file comes in. And I encourage you to, if you haven't started this yet, to start a process where you are always noting down great things as you accomplish them, because you are bound to forget them. I forgot what I had for lunch today. I don't even know if I had lunch today. That's how bad my memory is. So I need to make sure that I'm writing things down. And you probably have a better memory than I do, but you might want to take advantage of this suggestion. So the work wins file is basically like a brain dump of all the great things you've done. Just dumping and writing down all the things that come to mind as you are accomplishing them, or taking time to revisit what you've already accomplished in your career. and reflecting. So I encourage you to build this as a build this habit now and make it habitual so that you're always in a mode of noting down the great things that you've done, the results that you've created, and so on. So some examples of what you might note down in your work wins file are positive outcomes and results, project highlights. If you work on projects or contribute to projects, the success of those projects and what they ended up doing or enabling for stakeholders, let's say. Oh, my mouse. Process improvements, how you made things better and how much better you made them. People and leadership highlights, how you led groups, how you inspired groups, mentored groups, coach groups, anything that comes to mind. There are no rules about what you put in your work wins file. It's for your own records. But I really encourage you to make this a habit, and also to make sure that you make it easy on yourself to make it a habit. So writing these things down in a place that you might go to frequently. So for me, I like to keep track of things in my phone, in my notes app. I also like to keep track of things in Google Docs. And that's accessible across all my devices. How about you, Amy? How do you keep track of things?
Well, I want to bring up a great point that Jude made about emailing them to yourself and maybe titling them work wins. So you can search by subject later on. It will make it really easy for you.
That's a
So
great idea.
actually, she said, just as a reminder, you might not have access to your work email. So keeping them on there isn't really going to help
Right.
you if you've left that employer. So make sure you
Right.
email them. Like sometimes I actually take things and I'll email them to myself from myself if I want to remember something. Like you, I use notes. I know you love Google Docs because that's how we often work together.
Yes.
I don't love Google Docs, but that's just my own issue. But yeah, usually notes and emailing something to myself. I have a notebook and I write things down, but often things get lost in there. So
Yeah.
no, I'm not the best at keeping track of notes. I just have to keep as much as I can in my head. It's not easy.
Yeah, my head purges constantly, so I can't trust it to keep track of what I've done at work. I love the email suggestion, especially if you get positive feedback from someone.
Yes.
I think sending that to yourself so you have it on file to see what other people are saying about you, how other people are praising you, is a great idea. And I actually have a folder in my email called I think I just called it positive feedback. So and it can help kind of like boost your confidence if you're
Having a
feeling a
low
little low.
day. If you're at a career crossroads and you're or coming, coming to a new country, that might be a really good time to reach out to people you've worked with before or family and friends and say, "Hey, I'm trying to build a resume. What did you like about working with me, or what value did you think I brought?" And you'd be surprised how people will contribute, or ask for people to give you recommendations on LinkedIn. And
Yes.
I always look at what they say, because sometimes there's a consistent theme and it triggers a memory for me about, oh yeah, I did this or I did that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great idea. And I love LinkedIn recommendations. And that's a double whammy too. You have the recommendation to display to other
Yeah.
people, and then you learn something about yourself. So great ideas. All right. So let's talk about kind of the overall resume writing strategy. We kind of alluded to this earlier. So what we really want to go for as we're writing our resume is something called like a AAA approach. So we want to stress our abilities, so our skills, and we want to use some adjectives to describe ourselves. This is more so in the beginning of our resume, as you'll see in a bit, in the summary section, which we like to keep super short and sweet. And then accomplishments. So we've mentioned this is really the meat of your resume. Accomplishments back up and demonstrate that you have the abilities or the skills. And we really want to go for a simple structure with our resumes. As Amy was mentioning earlier, design and getting super creative and using tons of colors and graphics and things like that can really clutter a resume and make it confusing. I was talking to a recruiter and he said to me, don't make me go on a treasure hunt to find the information I need. And I was like, that's perfect. I'm stealing that. So don't make me go on a treasure hunt. So don't give the reader work to uncover and see that you are qualified for the job that you're applying to. Once you give them work, you've lost them.
Yeah, and one of the things that, like, besides graphics and everything, one thing that I find really clutters up, and you're probably going to talk about this in a bit, is jargon.
Yes.
Let me be very clear when you're talking about what your accomplishments are. Just clearly state what those are, because we want to work with people who are that we can just, have conversations with to get something done, and they're going to use straight, I know that sometimes people are challenged because English might be their second language, and that's okay. It can be learned, but don't try to. I find a lot of people, whether English is a second language or not, cover up some things by using a ton of jargon and almost confusing people so they seemed a little more senior than they were, or had more responsibilities. I think the best thing to do is be really straightforward, because people will figure it out when they're talking to you.
100%. And that's actually a common complaint from recruiters is the fluff. It's often referred to as fluff, where there's just a lot of words with very little substance. Recruiters hate that because they can't get to the heart of your qualifications without having to kind of wade through the jargon.
Yeah.
Jargon is also something that super technical professionals need to watch out for. This is a common pitfall of very technical job seekers, very technical professionals, is using a lot of jargon or a lot of overly technical language, where simplified language would serve much better to describe an accomplishment, and using a lot of acronyms. We got to be careful with the acronyms. And if we are going to use an acronym, we need to establish it first by spelling it out.
And then putting it in brackets. Yes, that's a really good idea.
We can talk about that more later if anybody's wondering about that. So simple structure, please save your money and don't buy a resume template. Resume templates for purchase are really designed by designers in most cases who don't have an idea of how to actually write a resume. So just save your money, please. And also please build your resume in Microsoft Word, because that's really the standard. And sometimes you might have a recruiter asking for your resume in Microsoft Word if they want to put you in front of one of their clients, so they can maybe make some adjustments. Microsoft Word is really where you want your resume to live. How you submit it can be in PDF if that's permitted, or if that's a permitted file. So that's fine. But build the resume and write the resume in Microsoft Word, please. Don't use Pages. Oh, that was it. Okay, let's talk about your resume in the current era. So I'm going to show you kind of my approach, my standard approach to resumes. So I'll just tee it up with a little information about it. So we're really going for a fresh and modern look with resumes, but that doesn't mean it has to be designy or pretty.
I feel like we're planning for some fashion event here. Your fresh and modern look.
Yes.
Who wore it best?
Yes. So we really do that by going for going with a sans serif font. That is my general recommendation. You're not going to lose any points if you really want to use Times New Roman, but it does give a dated impression. So a sans serif font is like the font that you're reading right now on your screen. So it reads really well digitally, and that's what we're trying to go for. I
like Arial. What do you think of Arial?
Arial is fine.
Okay.
Arial is totally
That's
fine.
my go-to.
That's your go-to? Yeah.
Mhm.
This one's an aftermarket font. I think this is Railway.
Oh, yes, I'm familiar with that one.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah, Arial is fine. Calibri Light, Tahoma. There's like a Microsoft Microsoft Sans Serif font, like a house font, let's say.
Okay.
There's so many different fonts to choose from. Uh,
Yeah,
for an instant modern feel, a sans serif font will help you.
great.
Yeah. We
No
want to
bullet bar.
avoid bullet barf.
Yeah.
And I'll explain that. So bullet barf is really where we're exclusively using bullets to write our
Mhm.
resume. So we really want to use bullets to highlight important points and draw attention to them. So our accomplishments will likely live in bullets after we've built a little bit of an explanation and given context to our role. And I'll show you that in a bit more detail shortly. The reason that we want to avoid using all bullets is because it's kind of like if we were to use all bullets, that would be like highlighting an entire page on a textbook. Nothing stands out. So using bullets, we want to do so strategically and somewhat sparingly. So you'll see what I mean shortly. Length guidelines. A lot of people are super worried about the length of their resume. So there is no right or wrong number of pages for your resume. I like to put guidelines around it for those who are looking for some kind of framework for how long their resume should be. I like to go for 1 page for anyone who has less than 5 years of work experience in their target profession, or 2 pages if you have more than 5 years of work experience in your target profession. Again, these are guidelines. These are not rules. Your resume needs to be as long as it needs to be in order to tell your story the right way.
This is a
And that
very controversial issue.
number of pages?
Yeah, it
I
is.
know.
And I encountered this a number of times myself. So just for context, I have, uh, over 20 years of work experience now. More than that. A
Yeah.
lot. Let's say a lot. I could
Sure.
still write a resume that's 2 pages. And
Yeah, I would
if
do
you're
2-page resume.
yeah, and if you're in an academic profession, often the standard is a much longer resume, and I understand that totally. But
Yes, if you're in academia, you're looking at a CV. So this is not the presentation for you.
yes,
I am not an expert in academic CV.
I know those are tough, but I will say this is that I'm a big believer in the 2 page, and I think that if you make your resume too long, you will lose credibility because people will wonder if you're in a work environment, are you going to have difficulty moving projects along? It calls a lot into
Mm,
question when someone goes on and on and on and on and they put in a lot, and it's about targeting your resume. This is something you talk a lot about,
yeah,
Kamara. Targeting
yeah.
your resume. If you targeted your resume for the specific role and you focused on your transferable skills and your accomplishments that are based in this role, it shouldn't go on and on. You need to call that sorry, I shouldn't use that word, like remove the content that is going to clutter up your resume that is not relevant, even
That's
though we know that you've accomplished, like even though you've accomplished these things. And one thing I think people have trouble doing is letting go of some of the accomplishments they're proud of, even though they're not related to the role.
Yes, that's such a good point. That is a common challenge. Um, you know, it if you can translate an accomplishment to make it make sense and show that you're qualified for your target job, then it might be worth including. But we're only including the best stuff, not all the
Mhm.
stuff.
And
So
Massimo made a good point too. Like he started working in 97, but he cut off everything before 2003, right? Because there's certain, especially in like a marketing function, what you did before 2000 or even before 5 years ago or 10 years ago, it's so dated now because the world has changed so much that it might not be relevant. So that's a good way to keep it down, is to cut out a lot of the content that happened like a long time, over 20 years ago.
yeah,
If
yes.
yes. But you might have
sometimes-
worked for a good employer and you want that on there for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's when and I have some videos on this kind of this approach on my YouTube channel. That's when we might want to use a highlight section. So we're pulling out some really important highlights from our earlier work experience, especially, as you said, Amy, if you had some really strong brands that you worked for. And the only thing with cutting work experience as well that we want to make sure we avoid is creating any career gaps.
Yes. Yeah.
So sometimes I'm seeing people just cut like 10 years of work experience, recent work experience, because they think it's not relevant. You have to do a little bit of translating and make it relevant rather than create a career gap, because that's going to be more problematic than it being slightly irrelevant. So with our resume, we want to make sure that the reader can get the important information fast. And we're going to use an accomplishments and results focused resume. And in doing so, one of the ways to make sure that we're sharing important information or information that's relevant to our reader is by asking ourselves kind of, so what? As we're writing a detail or thinking of including an accomplishment, asking ourselves, so what? Like, why would the reader be interested in this? What does this reinforce in terms of my qualifications? And we'll talk a little bit more about reinforcing qualifications in a few minutes. Okay, so I'm going to leave this up on the screen just for a little bit, but this session is being recorded. So if you want to revisit this, to look at the structure, pause the recording just to get a good idea of kind of this really simplified resume structure, then please go for it. So I'm going to go into each of these sections one by one. So we've got 5 sections here. Nope, 6. No, 5. Yeah.
I was going to say, what?
Yeah.
Where's
the
6?
work experience is on 2 pages. Yeah. So this is your kind of a classic 2-page resume. Let's dive into each of the sections here. Okay. So the first section at the top of our resume that I like to use here is, of course, we want our contact information at the top. So our first name, last name, our title, and I'll tell you more about that, our city, state, or province, phone number, email, and a link to our LinkedIn profile. So the title at the top is usually the job to which you're applying. So let's say I'm applying to a sales representative role. I would, instead of having title there, it would just say sales representative. And this really primes the reader for how they should be interpreting your resume, and also identifies what you're applying to, basically. So
it's a nice little cognitive trick too.
Sorry?
You're already tying it's a nice little cognitive trick too, because you're tying your name to that role already.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So I'm the person for your sales representative job. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So with our one other note about our contact information, with our email and with our LinkedIn, we want to make sure that we hyperlink those links. So that means that someone can just click on email. I think in Word, it's like control click, and then go and send you an email directly from their email system. Or with LinkedIn, click and go directly to your LinkedIn profile. We want to make it super easy for a reader to navigate your resume. Then let's get into the professional profile paragraph. So I like to make sure that this is no more than 4 lines in a paragraph. You could also throw in a couple bullets here if you really want to highlight a couple really important things about your career, kind of the overarching themes of your career. This really helps the reader get to know you. And this is where you can talk about your key strengths and characteristics and skills, and basically help the reader understand what you will uniquely bring to that role, to that sales representative role that you're applying to, let's say. And then what I like to do is follow up with a short skills section. And this is where we really want to study the job posting and go through it kind of with a fine-tooth comb and identify, what does the employer require of the candidate? What do they require of me? And how does that match up with my own skill set? So we're looking at including things like technical skills. So if I have sales strategy skills, we're still using the sales rep example. If I have sales strategy skills, I'll put that in there because they're probably looking for that. Leadership skills, maybe I've been a sales manager, so I might want to talk about sales coaching or just leadership in general, team leadership. And this is where you can also include any languages, additional languages, if you're fluent in them. You don't want to include a language here if you are not fluent, because we never want to get ourselves in a situation where we're asked a question in a language that we're just so on.
Yeah. What about things like expertise with Salesforce or HubSpot, which are client relationship management software tools?
Yeah, absolutely. You can include any tech that's important and has been identified in the job posting that you have. So yeah, let's say it's Salesforce or some other CRM. Let's say Zoom is particularly important. You can note Zoom here. Anything that comes up that you are confident in and are proficient in, you can include that there. All right, so let's talk about some common pitfalls with these two sections. So with contact information, including your full mailing address is no longer something that we do. So it's a privacy thing. Mostly, we don't really want to include our full mailing address on a document where we aren't always certain where it's going to end up. And including inactive email addresses or inactive phone numbers. Most people don't do that, but I have seen it happen. So we want to be careful about that. And not hyperlinking our email or LinkedIn URL. And using the header section in Word. Okay, so when we go into a blank Word document, we see the top of the page. But then if we go all the way close to the top margin and double click, that's when it opens up the header section in Word. We don't want to use that. The reason is information does, when we're applying online, the information from there doesn't properly input into our application online, creating more work for us. Mm-hmm. So we want to make sure that we avoid using that. We're building everything within the page on Word that we see. And I have a video on hyperlinking links if you want to check it out.
Yeah, because not everyone knows how to do that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So please do check it out on my YouTube channel. Professional profile paragraph, so that section at the top after our name and contact info. The common pitfalls are having it be too long or too generic, or as Amy was mentioning earlier, using too much jargon, too much fluff. We want to be pretty specific here. And that's generally the main pitfall with that section. And then with the skills section is measuring or qualifying our skills. That's not necessary in our skills section. And we really can't self-measure our own skills or self-qualify our own skills. So we want to avoid saying things like excellent communication skills or excellent Salesforce skills. Just say Salesforce. Mm-hmm. We don't need to get into a preamble about it. We also don't want to use what we see on a lot of these designy resumes are bar graphs or like ... to measure how proficient you are in a particular skill. Recruiters hate this. It means nothing to them. And it really does you a disservice because you're going to leave the reader trying to interpret what you mean, and then you've lost them again. So don't measure your skill level.
I'm excellent at everything. I just
play with a skill and then
5 stars.
Skill section, just guessing what skills to include. this, you know, the job posting's there to help us and guide us and give us the clues and cues we need to decide which skills of ours to highlight. So use it to your advantage. And irrelevant skills. So let's say I'm applying for that sales representative role and I mentioned that I actually can read code. Is that relevant? No, probably not.
Yeah. And it totally takes people down a different path, and they're like, oh, and they'll second guess, like, is this the right, are they applying for the right job here? And as soon as you do that, you're ruining it for yourself.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Yeah. And just including too many skills in general. I will usually include a max of 12 skills. We're highlighting your core skills here, not every skill that you have, because you are all very skilled. We don't need to include everything, right? And using text boxes or tables in our resume in the skills section. Sometimes it's a little difficult we find it a little difficult to format things in Word. I admit Word is really tricky sometimes and not user-friendly a lot. So sometimes people use text boxes because you can drag them around, and tables because it outlines everything or spaces everything perfectly. We want to avoid doing that. And I have some videos on how to format your skill sections easily, and then also using a column approach if you want to. Either way works.
On the skills section, one of the things that I found to be problematic for people is you're saying too many here. I've seen a few where there's too few. And I'm like, wow, you have so many skills that apply to this job, and you haven't put them up front in your resume. So that's another thing that I would, and that, like you said, don't guess. Go to the job description, ask yourself, which skills do I have that they're asking for that are peppered throughout this resume or this job ad, and place them in the skill section.
Yes, exactly. That job postings really are map. Like it's our map. So we need to use it. And yeah, anyway, I'll leave it at that. It's our map. Anyway, let's talk about professional experience. Okay, so this is the bulk of our resume. As you can see, I forgot that it spanned 2 pages in my example. So again, we're talking about accomplishments, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about accomplishments in the next slide. But accomplishments are your best achievements and results at work. So the things that you noted down in your work wins file, or you will note down in the future in your work wins file, will be kind of the ingredients, so to speak, of your accomplishment statements on your resume. When we're going through this and trying to write accomplishment statements, so the bullets that you see above here, what I recommend is a rack approach. So you may have heard of the star approach. You may have heard of the car approach. I like to turn it on its head and go for the rack approach. So what we're doing is we're going to lead with the result that we created. Then we're going to provide the action that got us to the result and the context as well for what this result means. Now, oftentimes the action will satisfy the context. So we'll take a look at a very specific accomplishment that will hopefully help illustrate that approach and kind of the dissecting how we might approach a accomplishment statement. And then what we want to make sure our accomplishments are doing are also satisfying what I call the 5 R's. So we want to make sure that what we're sharing is relevant to our target job, that it relates to our target job, that it reinforces our skills that are required and desired of us in our target job. So we're really using that job posting and making sure that it resonates with the reader and that it really kind of speaks their language. So this kind of goes back to what I was saying before about technical professionals sometimes getting too technical in their accomplishment statements and then losing the ability for the accomplishment to resonate with the reader because it's kind of way over their head. So we want to be as simple in our language as possible. And we may need to also reframe something, especially if we're making a career transition we may need to kind of translate or change what we are emphasizing in our accomplishments so that it makes sense for our new direction. And quantifiable accomplishments can help, but not everything has to be quantified. I know there's a lot of stress in the resume world about making sure you use numbers. You don't always have to use numbers. You can use words to explain results as well. So let's take a look at the rack approach for writing a resume accomplishment statement. So here's an example of one that's, an accomplishment statement that's okay. So built relationships with clients, which resulted in an increase in sales. Okay, cool, whatever. That's nice. But let's say this with even more impact, and let's use the rack approach. Increase sales 25% in 1 year through renewals by revitalizing relationships with existing clients. So we're being much more specific here. We're giving a number, in this case, a number works. We're giving some context to how we did this and also providing an action for how we achieved this result. So if we break it down, if we dissect kind of the anatomy of this accomplishment statement, at the front, we've got the result. So we've got increased sales 25% in 1 year, very specific. And then following that, we provide the action and the context for how we made this happen. Renewals and revitalizing relationships with existing clients. And it's really that straightforward. Like, we don't need to, again, be guessing about how to approach writing an accomplishment statement. If you follow this structure, it should really simplify the process for you and make it a lot easier on you to actually write each accomplishment as you go along. Okay, so common pitfalls with the professional experience section are hiding career gaps. So I'm actually going to go up a bit here. Up. I forgot about this. At the top here in this professional experience example, we have permanently relocated to city in province, state, and ready for next role as sales representative, let's say. So if you left your last role because you relocated to North America and there's been a period of time where you haven't been working, you can simply explain it with, hey, I moved halfway across the world and now I'm ready to get into the workforce. So we're not hiding anything. We're not, we're not being, saying anything like, oh, well, I've been looking for a job and things like that. We're just saying, hey, I've relocated. Everyone knows that takes time and you're ready to step into the workforce here in your new home. So yeah, that's what I mean by hiding career gaps. We don't just want to hope that no one's going to notice our career gaps. You just want to go ahead and address them simply and straightforwardly. We also want to avoid just cutting irrelevant jobs and creating a career gap that way. So if we find that our jobs are irrelevant, this is where the reframing is going to become very important. And making sure that what we are sharing is relevant to our new target job.
And I also see very often people go way too long into too much detail about those irrelevant jobs. And they'll put like the same amount of bullet points for every single role they had when there's 2 or 3 roles that are the most relevant for this particular job. So if you have a job that is irrelevant, maybe just don't put as many bullet points under it.
Yes.
No That's need also to go on about something.
Yeah. And same goes for if a job is super short. Like let's say you took a bridge job and it was just super short, like a 6-month or a matter of months gig. You don't need to say a ton about it because in relation to your longer jobs, it should get less real estate on your resume. And so you don't need to feel compelled to or obligated to explain things away.
Yeah, that's right.
Not using active verbs. that's so using passive voice like responsible for, provided, I mean that is an action verb but it's boring. Assisted with. So we want to use verbs that help paint a picture. So before in my example I said increase sales, I could have said boosted sales. I could say I used other verbs like revitalized, and also I could have said something like rejuvenated. There's so many different verbs that we can use that can help create a picture in the reader's mind. And there are some great lists floating around on the internet for alternative verbs to kind of your generic like managed, or assisted, things like that. So take a look. The Daily Muse or the Muse has a list that I think is really great, but some other content creators have also compiled lists that you might
Oh,
want to
that's
check
really
out.
good advice. Because people always struggle, like how
I
to,
know, I know.
yeah, and you just see managed,
Yeah,
so many times through a
so many
resume.
times.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And yeah, sharing your relevant accomplishments, sharing all of your accomplishments, or too much resume real estate on old experience. These are all common pitfalls. I think a lot of people are familiar with these. So I hope that this is helpful. And one thing that I forgot to mention earlier in this section, let's see if I can go back.
Yeah. You have to it's like rewinding on a film.
I know. Okay. Are we back in the professional experience?
I can't see your screen.
Oh, maybe I need to reshare it.
Mhm.
Okay.
There, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So sorry, one thing I forgot to mention is, so we've talked a lot about accomplishment bullets, but I forgot to talk about this section up here. So with every single role, I recommend providing a little bit of an introduction to what the role was. And this is where you can get out of your system all of what you want to say about your responsibilities. So we're not using the bullets to talk about responsibilities, but we're going to use that short, very short paragraph right under the role title and our employer to talk about our responsibilities.
And I have a
And
question about this. Is
yeah,
there, because sometimes I see people list a company that's unfamiliar, right? Does it help to add in that section what the company does? Just a quick, like it was a car manufacturer, or a technology, surveillance technology business or something.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. Um, it totally does help to give context that
Yeah.
way. So I worked for I worked for a one person firm at one point. So I would say something like, so what I did is I oversaw office operations or what have you, or oversaw administration operations for a boutique, let's say boutique insurance and investment brokerage firm. And that's it. So
Yeah.
just one sentence at the top, a very short one, just to give that context, and then you're done. You've got it out of the way. You don't need to explain it any further, and then you can talk a little bit more about what your core responsibilities were.
So
So we're
Kamara,
not listing everything here. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and one of the things that I find happens in some of them, and this is totally up to you, I'm in it for the long haul, but they sometimes make a call when they have a ton of content to impart, and they realize that maybe they don't have the time to share it all in one episode. So we can either continue, or we can say maybe we'll have a part two, but it's totally up to you.
Or are you talking about right now?
Yeah, right now.
Oh, I
Because I
wasn't
feel like
watching the
we're,
time.
yeah. No.
We're nearly done.
Oh, okay. No problem.
Yeah.
Whatever you want. I didn't know how much, and I talked too much maybe when we were at the
Oh, no, no, no,
beginning.
no, no. No, no, no. And this is being recorded. So if you have to drop off, if anyone needs to drop off, you can revisit the rest of the recording. But we are almost done, I assure you. So yeah, we started a bit late, so I'll just get right back into it. And now I gotta
You got to fast forward now. I'm pushing the fast forward button.
Okay, so let's talk quickly about community involvement. I'm not going to say much about this. This is your volunteering. The truth about this section is it's nice to have, it's not necessary. It would be the very first thing that you cut if you are challenged with space. I hear more and more from recruiters that they do not care about this section at all. My guideline for your community involvement, your volunteering, is to go no more than 5 years back, because this really starts to become irrelevant if a lot of time has passed. And one of the pitfalls is including one volunteering role just to have this section. So maybe you spent a Christmas, volunteering at a shelter or something at just one time in the last 5 years. Don't bother including this. It's not necessary. Okay, education. So we're really nearing the end now. Education.
I'm not in a rush.
Okay, good.
I'm just wondering if we had another hour of content, we should.
We do not
come back.
We do not. So you can include your graduation month and year, but you don't have to. I'm often cutting graduation months and years for my clients because they might be worried about ageism. So one of the easiest giveaways on age is putting your graduation month and year. So just cut it if you're even remotely worried about that. Do not include GPA, please. Even, unless your GPA is crazy out of this world outstanding, don't include it. It's really not important or necessary. And you can mention, if you are a newcomer and you had your education check for equivalency at any point, you can include confirmation of who did that. So like WES or what have you. I think there's only like 3 to choose from in Canada, and for the US, I'm not entirely sure. But you can put that if you'd like. You don't have to.
I have a question
Yes.
about education. So if you have your PhD, I've noticed this on LinkedIn a lot, and that's why I ask, is people will say Dr. and I'm not, but I'll just say Dr. Amy Davies because it sounds so good. But I've got my PhD in psychology, let's say, or that's pretty related, but like a PhD in business of some kind. What are your thoughts about someone adding that to the beginning of their resume, like, or even Amy Davies PhD?
I would say it depends. So if you're applying to academia, then maybe, although I'm not an expert on academic CVs, if you're applying to university administration or school administration, maybe. Generally speaking, when I've worked with clients who are PhDs, I do not include doctor. I just include PhD, and I might even cut PhD if I feel like I'll cut it from after their name if they're cool with it, but also if I feel like it might scare the reader off.
Yes. Yeah. That was my thought, because we have so many wonderfully educated people who come to North America and they are looking for that bridge opportunity or their starter job in a new country. And it's, I feel like even though it's really an important accomplishment and will contribute to all the work, the wonderful work they do, it may not help them get the job that they need when they first arrive.
Right. Yes. I think it really depends in terms of what is required of you. If a PhD is required, then please include it.
Yeah.
But if it will give someone pause and think, they might easily get bored in this role, or
yes, that's right. That's right.
That's where we need to maybe think twice about including it right at the top. But certainly in your education section, you can include it. But I wouldn't just right out of the gate for certain roles say, I'm a PhD.
Yeah. There's a question from George.
Sure.
I have an answer, and then if you don't mind, and then maybe
Go
I'll
ahead.
pass it to you. He asked about what are your thoughts about why a LinkedIn link should be included on a resume. It might be distracting and take the reader away. And my opinion is, LinkedIn adds credibility if you're using it correctly. It kind of, people will go to that. They say like 80% of the time that a recruiter or a hiring manager is truly interested in bringing you in as a candidate, they will go to your LinkedIn. LinkedIn is not a static document either. LinkedIn can show what you're posting, how you're interacting, what content you're creating, what recommendations that you have. And it also, they might be looking to see if it actually matches, because what we say publicly and what resumes are more private, right? Like they're not private, but they're not displayed on social media. So sometimes they're looking to see if there's inconsistencies, and those inconsistencies can be red flags. I do think LinkedIn, it does a lot to help people in certain fields really validate themselves and get jobs and connect. Maybe they also just want to connect with you on LinkedIn, right? And so that's a good thing. So those are my reasons why to include it.
Yeah. I don't have anything to add.
Oh, okay.
You answered it
Kamara
perfectly.
approved.
Yes. Yes, there's so many things that you can include on your LinkedIn that you might not have space or might be inappropriate to include on your resume. And LinkedIn is really visual, right? So my favorite part of LinkedIn at the moment is the featured section. And it really can give someone a really quick snapshot of your body of work. And that's kind of difficult to do on your resume unless you want to send someone over to a portfolio. But in LinkedIn, you have a built-in portfolio with that featured section. So that's what I really like about it.
You know what? We had a bit of a miss that we haven't run a LinkedIn session.
Yes, I mean,
we need
we
to
can
plan one. Yeah, I think we should plan one. Thanks,
Yeah,
George,
for
for
sure.
bringing that up.
Absolutely. So education, common pitfalls, including a credential you didn't finish. What I like to do, if you want to include any education that isn't finished or where you didn't graduate, but you think it's important to include, I call it coursework in whatever your specialty or major was, or including super irrelevant education. And when I'm talking about super irrelevant education, I'm not talking about degrees, more so like that one time that you got certified as a pastry chef, but now you are a project manager in tech. You don't need to include your pastry chef.
Yeah, I see this a lot. Yeah.
Or if you bartended on the side, and so you have serving it right, and you don't need to include that if you're not moving into a bartending role. So make sure it backs up what you are qualified to do, what you're applying to. And then including education for defunct tech, like any tech that's super old and no longer used and might reveal your age. Cut that. Only include the education for tech that is relevant, makes sense, and is current. Clearing up a few more things. There's no one size fits all type of resume. So trying to apply for different types of jobs with one resume will cause you problems. And you mentioned this at the top, Amy. Like you can't just use one general resume to capture all possibilities of jobs that you might want to apply to. So being targeted and having your target job identified is super important. Your resume should prioritize human readers. So there's lots of talk about the ATS, the applicant tracking system, supposed bots, AI. Don't stress about this. The people who are reading your resume are people. And so you want to make sure that you're keeping them in mind when you're writing your resume.
That's such a good point.
Thank you. And not worry about all this mysterious tech. It's not as important ever as the human reader and having something a human can read. And yeah, use the tips shared today and really stress that simple structure and that keywords are important, but it's more so the accomplishments. I should update that bullet there. It's more so the accomplishments to reinforce your skills that are critical.
I just want to say one thing before, because I know maybe you and I've collaborated a lot, Kamara. So I've seen the before and after, and it is kind of like a fashion show, like the person getting the makeover, right? The resume makeover.
Sure.
And I literally breathe a sigh of relief when I see the resume and the structure that you've outlined today. From where it was to where you take it. It's just like, this is going to work. This is, and I'll say that in our program, we have a huge success rate with people getting jobs. And I would say really quickly and good jobs. And I think a lot of that is in the quality of the resume that they write and that you've kind of supported them with, but also just simply with nothing else, because I know people might not have money to invest in services like yours. But it's amazing the difference that using the structure will make for you. So I just wanted to add that in. We don't think we're like, okay, we just want to use maybe, and don't take the resume necessarily from the country you've come from and just cut and paste and try to, I would start from the beginning, but I would also consider that maybe there's things that are really different about the country you've come to versus the country you're in. And you want to make it clear that you are going to be great working in this environment. And part of that is communicating that through how you structure your resume.
Awesome points. Just to wrap up, there are a few things to consider in terms of language. So there are slight differences in spelling between Canada and the US, English spelling, and the UK, of course. So just make sure that you've got that, that you're checking for that. And get your documents proofread before putting them to use. So we're looking at spelling and grammar, of course, but also, does this make sense to the reader? That's really important to make sure that what you're sharing makes sense, that doesn't leave any confusion. It can leave questions and opportunities for the reader to ask you more during an interview, but we don't want to confuse the reader. So just have your proofreader check for that as well. Okay, and just some key takeaways. First, really get clear on where you're headed in terms of your target jobs. Take stock of where you've been and track your work wins until you retire, please. And make your accomplishments make sense to your future employers. We'll get to questions in a second, but just want to let you know about our next session. So this will be Tuesday, September 13th, right, Amy?
Correct. Yes.
At 4 p.m.
Lucky
Eastern.
Day 13.
Right. We will probably go overtime then, because we will be doing live resume reviews of people who are attending today, or anyone who wants to volunteer their resume. So we'll be reviewing 5 resumes live. And if you'd like to get the email that will invite you to submit your resume, you can do so, or just make sure that you're signed up on our mailing list. That's super important because we'll be emailing asking for resumes. So take these next couple weeks to get your resume started. And then if you would like to submit it for review, you'll be asked to remove any confidential or identifying information and just keep kind of the meat of your resume, so your accomplishments and things like that. So
this is such a great opportunity.
Employers and keeping that confidential. Okay. Yeah. So any questions that we didn't answer? And you're okay for time too, Amy?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, Judith's just saying that it is such a great opportunity for people if they submit their resumes, and even and I've seen you do this, so it's it's pretty impressive. Yeah, you just got this skill. I can't believe how you can do it so quickly? You've obviously dealt with so many resumes over your years in this business.
Oh, yes. I mean, um, I could spend a long time picking apart a resume, but it'll be just the most actionable uh,
Mm-hmm.
and most actionable advice that I can offer,
Mm-hmm.
so
Yeah.
that it can get their resumes to a point that is, they're ready to apply. Obviously, after getting it proofread.
Yes. Yeah. And one tool I use, and I use it because even if English isn't your second, like even if English is your mother tongue, like I make mistakes all the time, and I always say to people, you're a much better critic than you are a creator. It's much easier to be a critic than a creator, right? So
Right.
Grammarly is an excellent resource and doesn't catch everything, but it does catch some things. And sometimes if I'm really writing a long and important email, I will actually use Grammarly for that. And it catches things that would have been so embarrassing and are so obvious, but you don't see them.
Yep.
Thanks, Risha.
Thank you, Risha. Thank you, Jude.
Yeah, thanks, guys, so much for joining. And we're looking forward to the next session. And if you have recommendations for topics, please send them to us. I really
Yes.
think we should do a LinkedIn session, Kamara,
Yeah,
as
for
well.
sure.
Yeah, I don't know why I didn't think of that. Maybe it's because I'm too fully engrossed with LinkedIn that I'm just tired of it, but it's a really important job search tool. And we talked about
Yeah.
networking before and
Yeah.
networking on LinkedIn, but we didn't really go through section by section and talk about. And you reminded me that I need a features section. I need to add to my features section, so I'm going to do that in the next few days too.
Yes, I've added constantly to my feature section. I haven't capped out on it yet.
Yeah.
But we want to make sure that what you add or what's most recent is the most important stuff.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
but yeah, I've added a ton of stuff there, and LinkedIn hasn't said no, stop. So not yet. So
Yeah.
a
Well,
lot that you can put
listen,
there.
this was a great session. I always learn so much. I don't know, resumes are a funny thing, right? I work with
They are.
them as well all the time, but it's always nice to get different perspectives and get new ideas and think of things in a different way. It really helps. I think that people who have that ability to think about all these different things and it will come out in their resume too, thinking creatively a little bit about it as well.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. Thank you, George, for joining us and for your question. Wonderful. So I don't see any other questions coming in, even with our 10-second delay. So anyway, with that, we will see everybody for resume reviews next 2 weeks from now.
2 Tuesdays. We had to take the week off. Next week is a lot of people have kids starting school, including me. So next week didn't feel like the right timing.
No. So, and also we're kind of on a 2-week cadence, so it
Yeah,
works.
that's right.
And then
Yeah.
that gives you time to do your resumes. Oh,
Exactly. You need that time. All right. Well, have a great night, everyone.
Take care, everyone. All the best. Thanks for joining us.